If you have the luxury of getting an athlete manager to speak to you or respond to an email, I would not hang up that phone until you ask them, what are the races that your company is focused on for this next year? What are those races? What are you not focused on?
And welcome back. We have Kelly Newlon joining in the studio here. We're also going to be testing this live. So we're doing it live. You can watch us. Well, actually, it's not live.
I was going to say, you didn't tell me that.
Wave to the fans.
Just kidding.
We're here in Boulder, Colorado with a super agent, superhuman, super chef, Kelly Newlon. Sabrina Little said she has no questions, but she just wanted me to pass along kudos for being awesome. So welcome to Long Run Labs, Kelly Newlon.
Thank you, John. Thank you for your kind words. And Sabrina, I'm such a fan. Her entire just existence is sort of everything that I aspire to be. So thank you.
I've been dying to ask you this question. Who is Kelly?
Gosh, I am a friend, a runner, a wife, a dog mom, cat mom, lifelong professional chef. Like, it's in my marrow. That will always be there. I get that question often lately, like, do you still cook? Absolutely. I need that balance. And then agent/manager. Yeah.
We got introduced to each other when I was visiting Boulder constantly in 2018 and 2019. And you were cooking for every Adidas group run and all of the Tim Olson events. And I would make it a point to only come to Boulder when you were doing events so that I could come to events where your food was being served. And that was my introduction to Boulder, really to trail running. So it's fun going full circle. And now you do quite a lot more than, I don't want to say just being a chef, because there's a lot to that, but you're a chef and you're doing all these other things as well. So for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to focus on the professionalization of trail running and the professionalization of running in general. But I want to know about you and your running background. How did you find endurance sport?
Gosh, when I was 5 years old. Do you remember when you were in elementary school, did you have like track and field day?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the kicker. Like, all I needed was the first race I ever ran. So that's like kindergarten, right? It was in Muskegon, Michigan at Reese Puffer Elementary School, and a cinder track. And it was like the yard, like 50-yard dash, and then the 100. And I was hooked. I remember just kind of like trotting over the side of the track and telling my mom and dad, like, I'm going to be a runner. That's it.
What was it about it?
It's just that running as fast as you could. And it was like embraced.
Right.
Everyone was like, it was celebrated in a way that I was like, oh, especially as a child, you're like, oh, you can do something as fast and as hard as you can.
Right.
So there's like no limits. There's no gas. It was just like all gas, no brakes. And it just felt, I don't know, electric. Yeah. And so I ran all through elementary school and like whatever that, we had like after school sort of like track kind of club. And then we moved to Indiana and Valparaiso, Indiana, home of Orville Redenbacher. Shout out Orville. He's real. I know a lot of people are like, he's not a real guy. I'm like, dude, he was totally real. But we moved to Valparaiso and running was this huge deal there. Like in Indiana, it's like basketball, but then it's cross country and track as well. And it like recess in elementary school and after school, it was just relays nonstop in the parking lot. And, shout out to the teacher who had us all doing that. But I think he was probably trying to just wear us out a bit. But, having moved to a whole new school, and the school that we were at in Michigan was a much different social class. When we moved to Indiana, it was like super fancy schmancy. And I was like, this is just really hard and awkward. But running was there. I was like, all right, I'm going to make it. I'm going to be okay. Because they run at recess. Like, what's cooler than that?
Isn't it cool how it unites?
Yeah, right? It's undeniable. It was just so good. And for me anyway, it was a true saving grace. I suspect that my time there would have been much different if I didn't have that. And then junior high school. So I was primarily a sprinter, 400 meters. Like when they would let me, I would jump in the 100, but it was right before the 100 or the quarter mile. And then I just always anchored the 4x4, which I loved. And then one year, as a track coach does, they're often the cross-country coach as well. They were like, you need to run cross-country. And I was like, oh my God, this sounds horrible. Because I didn't understand how to pace myself. Because when you're running around an oval, especially for, quarter mile, again, it's just all gas, no brakes. You're just hanging on until, the end so you can, dry heave. And yeah, I remember it just being so clunky and awkward and being like, someone tell me, someone give me the keys to figure this out because I don't understand. So it took a bit, but I really loved it. And I just loved being outside. And then there was, again, we lived in Indiana, so we would train like in cornfields and all around, golf course like usual. But there was one race, we went to the Hershey Relays in Pennsylvania. And per usual, I wasn't paying attention. I probably didn't listen to something that was told to me. And we'd start the race, and I just assumed it was going to be in another golf course, but it wasn't. It was a trail that led into the woods. And we were like jumping over trees. And I was like, this is the most magnificent thing I have ever done. Why has no one told me this existed? And why aren't we doing it this way in Indiana? Why are we on a golf course, for Christ's sake? And that was it. I remember being hooked and hearing the phrase trail running for the first time. So this probably would have been, John, 1985. And yeah, that was it. So that just set the pace for everything. And then when I went to culinary school in Hyde Park, New York at the CIA, that was in the Hudson Valley. And the campus is right on the Hudson River, but it was just surrounded by trails out in the woods. And I just...
like Bear Mountain area?
Close, not too far, yeah. But it was just so stunning. And nobody there that I knew ran, but I was just like before class or after, I was just out in the trails, out in the woods. And then I would see this woman running down Highway 9 in front of school every day. And I was like, who is this woman? One day I'm going to stop her and catch her. And then I walk into our culinary French class, and lo and behold, but the instructor for culinary French, Madame Gold, was the runner. So we hit it off.
Full circle.
Yeah, immediately. And then she introduced me to a handful of quote unquote older trail runners in the area who were probably my age. They're probably like 50, 55. And that was the end of that. I was just like hooked.
Did you ever imagine that could be your career, being involved in that sport?
At that time, no, because I was so head down into food, but I was really happy that running was back in my life in like a more official way. And like so many industries, one of the things I love about the culinary world is you can do so much more with it. I think initially it's like anything else when you're in high school, probably, a guidance counselor would be like, oh, you want to be a chef, therefore what restaurant do you want to work in? Or if you want to be a baker, what bakery do you want to be in? I walked in that world for several years, and then when we moved to Colorado years later, that's when I was like, I need to marry both of these things. This needs to happen together. Like, how can I make that work?
And so what did that look like? How did you think that you could make it work?
I was driving home from work one day, and a friend called me who was training for Ironman, and he said, hey, can you make me some meals just on the side so while I'm training I have fuel? And I was just my calendar was full. I didn't have capacity. And I was like, I'm so sorry.
I feel like that's a repeatable theme in your life.
Well, I have hard boundaries. So at that time, I did not, which the fact that I said no, I was like, wow, I don't think I've ever really said no to anything. So this was, 12 years ago probably at this point. But I was like, Angela, I'm so sorry. I can't do it. And I hung up the phone, and I was probably 10 minutes from our house at that point. And I just said the words out loud. Why am I not doing that? Why am I not feeding athletes as a profession? And that's what I'm going to do. And then I got home, 10 minutes later and told Morgan, hey, I'm starting a business. It's going to be called RAD. I need you to be my business manager. I know, Morgan, he's such a champ.
That was 2012, 2013?
2013. Yeah.
So you end up working with a bunch of the shoe brands to cater their training camps and their retreats. You start working with a bunch of professional athletes here in town and at races. At what point were you like, I'm doing the thing?
Like, at what point did I feel like, okay,
there's something there?
Oh, that was immediate. And also before the day that I was like, why am I not doing this? I also immediately, my mind was like, okay, oh, this is Boulder. Someone else is clearly doing this. There's probably 10 other people doing this. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, because, the business part is like, what's your competition? There was no one else doing it. And then I was like, well, why is no one else doing it? And the answer to that in my mind is because it's really bloody hard. It is quite difficult. And the experience that I had working in restaurants for so long at high profile restaurants is what taught me how to navigate all the issues that I work with on a daily basis. So if I hadn't had that, that was,
Like the
I knew what,
personalities.
yeah, that and just all of it, the physicality of it, hauling crap all over, it's a lot. But that set the table for something that was just unique and different. And I also know, someone might be more talented than me, but no one will outwork me. I can hustle with the best of them. And I knew it was going to be hard. I remember telling Morgan, I was like, if you want in on this, I would love it. But if you don't, please tell me now, because this is going to be one of the hardest things that you've done. He's like, oh, it'll be fine. And then he was like, I never want to do this again. Just the startup of it, right? Because it was a lot. And yeah, it's good stuff.
When did the agency work enter the picture?
I would say probably 2 years into RAD being live. And that was when people started reaching out to me and just asking things because, as you mentioned, I was spending my time, I would spend weeks at a time at a VRBO with I don't know, an Adidas team or Hoka, and I would just be with them at a team training camp or athlete summit. So I was with athletes all day and they're my dearest friends. And then transparently, what that looks like when I would get hired for something like that is the people that hire me are quite literally the marketing team. So it's the brand manager or the athlete manager. So the same people that have the responsibility of building the athlete team
are the ones feeding them.
Exactly. So I would have athletes asking me questions. And then at the same time, I would also have that athlete manager or the brand manager while we were there, usually at the end of the night or really early in the morning when it was just us in the kitchen. And they'd be like, hey, we're looking for someone that checks these boxes. Who do you think? You spend a lot of time with us and you spend a lot of time with other athletes. Who in your mind do you think we should think about that maybe we're overlooking? Or they would say, we're thinking about bringing this person on. There's kind of a pause on our team. What has your experience been with them? And so that was that part of the question. And then the athletes would be like, hey, I have this offer. Can you tell me, what do you think of this? Have you heard anything about this brand? Do you think I'd be a good fit? Or I have this offer here. Do you think I'm worth this? Do you think I'm worth more? And inevitably, a week prior, someone else would have asked me the same question about the same brand. And so all of a sudden I would have these offers in front of me. And it helped grow the catalog that I have today.
We were talking before we started recording about the influence of people on community to internal teams. I feel like that's a piece that doesn't get talked about in that person should sign with Adidas, that person should sign with Hoka, that person's a great North Face athlete. Can you talk about the intangible piece of building a team and what are these athlete managers looking for when they're looking to make additions? Because it's not just performance and it's not just social media these days.
Right. I love this question. And I think to your point, it's not something that's talked about. And so my team is small. I have 10 athletes that I fully represent, and each of them also has to be a good fit for me, and I have to be a good fit for them. So when they ask, when I'm like, what do you want? What brands are you interested in? They give me a list of brands, and I'll use Tailwind because there's some right here in front of me. If someone said, oh, I would really love to work with Tailwind, I'll say, well, tell me why. And they'll rattle off some things. And in my mind, I know what Tailwind is looking for, and I know what Tailwind is all about. And it's easy for me to let that athlete know, I think you would be a great fit for them. Or I might say, you know what, let's have you meet them and see what the vibe is. I have a little bit of a pause, but, let's give it a shot. Patagonia is another really good example. The countless times that people say, oh, I'd love to work with Patagonia. I'm like, well, great. Tell me about your stance on sustainability and the environment. They're like,
I just
oh,
like
I
the
don't
gear.
know. I like to vote. And I'm like, dude, that's not a good fit.
It's a two-way street.
It is. And I'm not going to waste Patagonia's time with that. If you want to work with them, I can help you build things up over the next year that will put you properly in that place. But you really have to believe in that for that effort to work. And if you don't, then we need to move on from Patagonia because you're not a good fit right now.
So I'd say there are three components that are going into how brands evaluate athletes. And please correct me if I'm wrong, if I miss or omit anything. I think it's community and internal fit. I think it's performance. And I think it's storytelling and presence on social. Some brands care about one, two, or all three of those things. Did I miss anything in summarizing that?
I don't think you missed anything in summarizing it, but let's also be very aware of sales within each of those boxes.
Say more.
It's all down to money, right? If an athlete is not driving the bus to like in a way that it brings sales in, then at the end of the day, these are all businesses, right? So performance equals sales. Like depending on what performance is for each brand. Some brands' performance is this person marketable, is this person, again, they're all the boxes together. Community and performance are all these things collectively large enough that it's creating sales or continuing to push sales. So if there's someone who checks maybe one of the three boxes, they're probably not someone who's going to get picked up at this time until they can check at least a couple of those boxes heavily. And let's say if it's someone who, Will Murray is a great example because he just started his first Instagram account and he probably, I know, it's a big deal. I don't know how many followers he has right now.
Check right now.
Yeah, let's check right now. But what I like about that is a brand. I literally just spoke to a brand yesterday on Will's behalf and they were like, hey, we know that's outside of his comfort zone. We're happy he just started it. It almost doesn't matter. How many does it say?
It's 658 when I first looked, and now 659 because I just
because you
mashed
followed
that
him.
follow button.
Right on, thank you. But the brand was like, hey, we're stoked on him, and we would love to help him grow that. Like we recognize that it's a two-way street, and that we have the resources to help Will. If he had not started that, we probably wouldn't be looking at him as closely. Or if he hadn't, we would have said, hey, let's at least start an Instagram account, and we can help build that for you because it is important.
One of the ways that I evaluate partnerships on the podcast side of things in speaking with brands is I must understand their intentionality with the partnership. And so I've begun selling ads for 23 podcasts, and most of them are in running. And so when I go to a brand, I'm trying to understand what part of the funnel are you interested in us supporting? Is it awareness? Is it consideration? Is it conversion? I think podcasts can do two of those. I think any brand partnership can do one of those very well and two of those sometimes. And if you're expected to do all three, you're setting yourself up for failure. Do you think that the athlete brand dynamic has a similar structure of how to set up for success? And are brands telling you and telling athletes what specific profile or what activities they're looking to leverage to drive the shoe sales? Or is it more like, I don't see a lot of hey, use coupon code Will Murray for 10% off Adidas, right? Mm-hmm. So is it mostly the first two stages of the funnel?
I think it not only depends on the brand, but it depends on who's already on that team within the brand, who's checking the other boxes heavily, that will leave a little space in there for someone to maybe have a strength in a different box than all three. I always ask, what are you looking for? And tell me about, what are you looking for this year?
Do you find that brands know what they're looking for?
Yes. Yeah.
All the time?
99.9% of the time. I've had one brand in the past year say, we don't really have those. I'm like, well, you should. Let's talk about that.
Okay, so from where I sit, it's 50-50.
Oh, wow. Yeah. For your sales or the pitching for pods?
When I talk to brands, the brand marketers, 50% of the time, they know what they're looking for, which is crazy.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
It also makes your job harder.
Right.
Yeah.
And
sorry to hear that.
And they'll often say, yeah, this is awareness. And then 6 weeks later, it's well, we're not converting. It's well, we didn't create content to focus on conversion. We're doing it because we agreed on awareness. So, okay, going back to those three categories of community, performance, and storytelling, I'm curious to know the evolving dynamic of how those interact, particularly in what we've seen with an increase in pay, right? You talked on Single Track about how many of the athletes on the teams that you're working with are making $50K or more. And 2 years ago, that was probably not the case. And Tara Dower is $500,000, as has been talked about. And there are athletes making $1 million. How did those three buckets of pieces that drive a successful relationship, how can an athlete, well, the performance one, if they win, right? How are the athletes and how are you speaking to the athletes about how to think about the value that they're offering within those three categories?
I think first it's important to understand that the numbers have gone up because, again, it all goes back to sales because there's more, there's higher sales, quite frankly, in trail running than there were 2 years ago by a few percentage points. So that is what allows there to be more cash to flow towards everyone. I go through when an athlete is interested in like if they give me like 3 brands they're interested in, I sit down with the athlete and talk to them about what that brand is looking for and let them know what is important to the brand, like where their buckets are of like importance. And then we go over how they match up with all of those things. And if they're like, okay, well, we're going to go and talk to, I don't know, fill in the blank, Brooks. Then we talk about Brooks, and we'll just kind of have a straight up conversation of these are your strengths. This is where they're going to see that maybe we're not as strong in these particular buckets here. So I want you to come to the table ready to talk about how you're working on
Like a
just
SWOT
those things.
analysis.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just kind of like anything else. It's like looking at a house. If you're like, I really wanted a 2-bedroom house, but this one has 1 and a loft. Like, is there something that we can convert into that second bedroom, you know? But yeah, there's always a team kind of conversation towards it. And it's also really important for the athlete to understand, like, it doesn't really, yeah, you might have had a really great year, but there's more to it than that.
I talked with Yuri Oswald a lot over at GU, and his sort of benchmark for signing an athlete isn't winning stuff. It's being an interesting person who does good in the world. Are you seeing that more now that brands are looking for more than just race performance?
Yeah. So first, let's just shout out Yuri. He's exceptional,
He's
right?
great. Yeah, he's very good, and he cares a lot.
He does. He just spoke to an athlete that I represent yesterday, and he sent me, both of them within seconds were like, that was the best conversation I've ever had.
I love Yuri.
He's so wonderful.
He's listening to this right now, I'm sure.
Oh,
while he's
shout
in his
out
van
Yuri.
or on his bike.
And yeah, there's even myself within my own business, John. I have 3 rules, and the first one is quite literally no assholes. So Yuri and I are very much on par with that, which is a great conversation because I would never send Yuri someone who did not align with Yuri and what he's trying to build with that GU team. So I think if you have, let's say, a brand is looking at 5 athletes and then you get it whittled down to 3 and then there's like the final 2, whoever has the better fit is going to get that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's a green light of it's more than just performance and being interesting and doing things outside of just training all the time. Do you think that that's true until you get to the top?
Oh, gosh. No, well.
Like for the longest time, Jim Walmsley didn't really say much.
Mm-hmm.
And now he is. He's going on broadcasts and he's like, I think he's much more interesting and marketable now, even though he's not winning Western States every year. But we see him as human. He's still an exceptional athlete who's better than 99.9% of humans on the earth at doing the thing, but he's opened himself up.
Absolutely. I think one, it was smart, whether he wanted to or not. It was really smart of him to do that. And, you know, Jim, if you're listening, you can chime in, send John a message.
Type in the chat.
Yeah, type in the chat. I do wonder if, you know, if you're at the top for a while and then there's a whole lot going on around you and, you know, if you're working with a brand who's like, look, we would like a little bit more human side of you to this, it makes me wonder if that was intentional or if it was just on the organic side. But yeah, it makes a big difference because it's great. The best thing that a hero can be for us is somewhat approachable within the human side of them, right? That's what it's all about. So if you don't have that, then it's not like, I don't want to buy shoes that this person is pitching if I don't connect
They're
with them.
Untouchable. Yeah.
Exactly. But at the same time, like I am 100%. I was talking to someone in a project I worked on last year from Australia, and I was like, dude, Americans love merch. We will buy the shit out of something if it supports a person that we're like cheering for.
Yeah.
And that raises the level of cheer, right?
So I think of 2 people when you say these types of things. I think of Kara Goucher, who is still signing multi-year. She signed through 2028 with Brooks, and Sally McRae, who I think Nike will sign her until the end of time. Or maybe not, I don't know. But
I'm just giving John a stare. Full transparency, I represent Sally.
Got it. Okay, so there's behind the scenes info there. But again, I've gone around races with Sally, and I've gone around with races with a lot of athletes. And I make the comment about Sally because more people go up to her and approach her and tell her that they inspired her to do XYZ or believe in themselves or sign up for a 100-mile race or whatever than any other athlete I've ever met by a factor of 10, at least in terms of who I see at races. And so you have people like this that, like, for some reason they put them on a pedestal, but they're still approachable. Like, how has Sally done that? What is the DNA of Sally McRae that makes her so like lovable.
She's a fighter. Things have not come easy for her. No one hustles like Sally. The woman is like nonstop dynamo. And she also, part of that is that's just who she is.
Right.
Part of that is she's had to be that way because of her life story. And I think the third piece to that is Sally is really aware that anything could be taken away from her at any time. The same with all of us, right? So she's not someone to rest on her laurels. It's one of my absolute favorite quotes is hustle beats talent when talent doesn't hustle. And Sally McRae just happens to be both. She's also just a goofy ding dong. And it's so like breath of fresh air, right? Because she's approachable. She does these extraordinary things, but she's also just, clumsy goofball and funny and contagious. And that's what it is because we can all relate to Sally and her story.
That's why we picked her for the ticket at Inside Tracker for Western States a couple of years ago. Because it was 10 years. She hadn't done it in 10 years or 10 years since her first time, and just relatable and a cool story with Mackenzie being a part of it that time around too.
It's really it's an undeniable, there's this pull to Sally and from Sally that is just like, hey, come hang out with me. We can do all this hard stuff together. Yeah.
While we're talking about DNA, I'm curious the makeup of an athlete who can be a professional athlete and support themselves in sport, whether it's with one big title contract or a couple of smaller things. Like, who is the right person to pursue something like that?
Gosh, who's the right person?
Not like name a name, but like what's the makeup of that person? What are you seeing as a person who can be successful?
Who can be that? Humility is a big one and something that we don't often talk about. And it takes a special ego to be a professional athlete. You have to have an ego, right? But within that, also kind of calling yourself on your own stuff, right? Like, and being able to check yourself at the door and put the work in and just be a human with it. But again, it goes back to that hustle. To train day in and day out, year after year, you have to be somewhat selfish within that, right? Because our focus has to be on you yourself as the machine, whether it's recovering, training, racing, any of that. So I think it's kind of a package deal with that, John. But yeah, kindness to yourself, kindness to your partners. Being a good partner is truly important. So one conversation I have often with an athlete is like, okay, you're signing this contract. Let's talk about how you're going to show up for this brand. This is not, I often get the feeling that athletes or the public in general or think brands owe us this. Why aren't brands paying this? And it's a really if you want a brand to care about you, you have to care just as much about that brand. So the person that is a truly kind person and understands that it's a gift to show up and to be able to do this as your job and gives back to their brand as much as they expect their brand to be invested in them, that's the winner there. That's the gold standard.
How does secondary sponsors so we have shoe sponsors that are generally footing the bill, pun intended, for the majority of it. How do supplementary or secondary tier sponsors play into that?
So same kind of boxes to be checked, right? Everything, again, it has to be around sales. If nothing's selling, there's no company to support you. The community and marketing piece is important. And depending on what that brand is doing as far as their marketing, are you a good fit for how they like to market? Janji is such a great example, right? They are so unique in what they do with their marketing and how they shoot things. And if you're not someone who is on board with what they're looking for and you're a good fit, they'll find someone who is. And they're really great at just seeing each person on their team sort of superpower and letting that person run with it. I really love to give them a shout out. They're in between a main partner and the secondary, right? Because they're apparel, which leaves the freedom to just have footwear, which is cool.
Right.
Yeah. Every one of those small brands, I love working with a smaller or secondary company because there's so much room for individuality within the contract and the partnership. And I'm starting to see more, not across the board when I say this, and a lot of people are like, well, but this company, but some companies are truly small, or maybe they're just 2 years old. So we need to allow them time to actually raise money. But some of those secondary partnerships are getting a bit of a boost with things monetarily, and they're able to either raise everybody on their team up a little bit or one person at a time, depending on the year.
I want to echo your statement on Janji. Janji sponsoring For the Long Run, so shout out to them on that. But I've loved that brand for over a decade. Mike and the team, they're fantastic. And I was listening to you talk to Finn about how they're a blend of performance and social focus, where Callie Vinson is a mega influencer and Ryan Montgomery is a performance athlete. And there is some overlap between what they do, but those are pretty separate personas. And there's room for both of them on a team like that. And they kind of let the individual drive in terms of how to represent that brand.
Yeah, I love that. Like, isn't that John G's superpower? Like, they look and they're like, great, what is John good at? All right, how can we support Jonathan to do this so that he can then best tell his John G story?
Right.
And yeah, that's good stuff. I just love it.
Why do you think other brands are afraid to do something like that?
Oh gosh, oftentimes the larger, like bigger companies have the usual marketing team mentality. So they're like, this is what we do, this is how it works, this is what we
Playbook to
do.
run.
Yeah, so not always the case. There's a couple brands that are in that kind of main footwear partnership category that do allow for individuality, but far too often do I see the just kind of on repeat regurgitated, this is what we do. But yeah, it's the superpower of John G. I appreciate it.
What role do non-endemics play for you in the work that you're doing?
It depends on the athlete. Some athletes, usually an athlete will say they're interested in it, and then there's a bit more work to it for them. So then it quickly backs off to like 50% of the people are like, okay, just kidding.
What do you
I just
mean
want to do this.
more from a content creation?
From a content creation, from...
Because they're not wearing the thing, eating the thing.
Yes. And I mean, let's face it, if you were a trail runner and your main partner is a shoe company, just your existence of being, you're producing content or racing, or athletes will be like, well, there's more to me than just racing. I'm like, great, then let's go with this non-endemic. And then they're like, but this is what I'm like, dude, we got to do you understand the conversation? They're like, I do. I'm like, so maybe we put a pin in it and then let's circle back in 6 months and see how you're feeling. I don't want to say it's the easy button by any means to stay with like the main, footwear partnerships or apparels that we expect, but it is a different amount of energy, and doing so and using that energy and bandwidth in the midst of a race season for a professional can often be clunky and counterproductive to what they want to do.
Do you think that there are more dollars to be made in the non-endemic space?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yes, I would say there are more dollars, but maybe less people. Like, I don't know, what am I looking at here? Like my iPhone.
Wayfair, West Elm.
Yeah, there's so many different ones. But, when you're looking at it, let's say Nike, they have an entire team of trail runners. West Elm doesn't want an entire team of trail runners. Right. So when someone's like, oh my gosh, Jonathan Levin got a thing with West Elm, and then everyone rushes over to West Elm. And I'm like, gee, let's pump the brakes a minute. Like that's...
By the way, West Elm, if you're listening, let's talk.
Yes, I have a couple of rooms. I need a new Murphy bed. But yeah, so that's often, it's just this panic of like the shiny thing and everyone kind of, runs over there in a herd. But so there is more money, but there are less opportunities for people in that space.
So you think it's kind of like once that seat's taken, that seat's taken?
I think there's probably a couple seats available, especially, whether it's man, woman, person of color. Like there's different boxes that could be checked there, but it's certainly not like a good fit for everyone. And it's definitely not the mass amounts that people are going to think it is.
Why do you think cycling and triathlon have nailed this with bank sponsors and car sponsors? I mean, like I've done deals with Volkswagen, Ali Feller, Ali on the Run podcast with Volvo, Tim Tollefson with Ford, Corey Waltering and Myrna Valerio with Bronco. I'm sure I'm missing people, but like we're seeing it,
Right.
And it gets celebrated. And then you take a step back and you're like, this is table stakes for cycling, NASCAR, and triathlon. Like Home Depot is on every car.
Absolutely. Well, that's the good point though, right? Like obviously NASCAR brings in a whole much more money, right? So Tony Stewart, I mean, they have so many different cars, and he sells, when he was racing for Home Depot, like the visibility there is undeniably different than it is in trail running, as it is different than it is in cycling. And if we look at cycling, entire teams are sponsored by the bank, not just one person, right? So I'm actually working with someone who's a mountain runner from Ecuador who's working with an automobile company and a bank right now. And that makes sense for him because the country that he's from, there are many, like it's a small country, but there are many banks that are involved in working with athletes. So it makes sense for him. But his entire team, like if he goes back, he's not on a team. He's sponsored by a brand, but the rest of that brand and the team, like they're not this cohesive unit that the whole team could be sponsored by them. So that's in my mind. One day I feel like it's going to happen for trail running, like the team thing.
I need the Costco racing team. I need it. I need to see a starting line with those fresh white singlets, the blue and the red, and Costco right across the front, right next to Hoka and Nike.
Why Costco?
Why not? Right? Like every time we go there, we spend hundreds of dollars. It's on food. It's such a logical pairing.
Race directors, how many race directors go to Costco?
Exactly. The meat, the vegetables, the beverages, the hot dogs.
Right? All the things. Yeah, I think that time will come. But for me, it kind of goes back to we're still quite a young sport comparably. And again, that whole team thing is a different situation. And you and I both know that there's a whole lot of money in tri that is at a different level than trail running, but we're getting there.
Yeah. The bank stuff is interesting. I had a chat with Stu, the race director of Ultra Trail Cape Town, and he said that in South Africa, the like stamp of approval on your race is to be sponsored by a bank. And that's just like status quo in South Africa, where your race has made it when a bank sponsors you.
It's interesting. South Africa is its own unique, climate.
While we're talking finances and banks, I'm curious your thoughts if you're seeing athletes omit sponsorship in lieu of equity positions. Like, is that happening in your world? Are you seeing that? In the partnership model?
Yeah, I feel like you and I spoke about this at some point. I'm not seeing athletes omit money altogether, but I am seeing it, like whenever I can, I try and work it into a contract, especially if it's with a large organization.
Large and not small?
Yes. If it's small, I can have the conversation. However, and this is where it gets sticky, there's one or two footwear brands that were like, we can't do this. This person's with us, but we don't pay them. They have equity in the company. And someone will be like, well, I can do that. I'll do that. I'm like, that wasn't an option for you. And if 6 people want equity in the company, then the owner doesn't own their company anymore. So that's why I'm always very gentle with the small ones, because I really try to be respectful of that, like the small business. But sometimes the larger companies will do different things as far as like adding a 401k or adding just different packages of things, or getting an athlete on health insurance as an employee. So there's ways to be creative with it, but I'm careful with mentioning on air equity in a company, because as everyone's going to go and try and get equity in a company now, like if we all do this, then that's not happening.
Yeah, interesting. I see it in the marketing partnership trade world where influencers are beginning to get equity in companies. And
it's exciting.
It is exciting, yeah. And like having a vested interest in the success of the company, it's a great way for the company to get the partner to go above and beyond what's in the deliverables.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I would like to see more.
I'm just checking my notes. I don't normally do notes, so this is a special occasion. I am super curious to press on the storytelling thread. What role and value does media play, and how do people in media help? Like, what can we do to help with athletes?
Regarding storytelling?
Yeah, and help make their brand partnerships successful.
When I have an athlete, hopefully this answers your question. If there's someone that I'm representing and they have a big project they're working on, a big storytelling thing, whether it's a film or I don't know, fill in the blank. One of the first things that I do before we even get like the sponsorship dollars for that, or maybe kind of as we're building that, is reach out to friends in media and say, hey, could you do a story on this? Actually, 3 of the athletes that I'm working with are writing books right now, completely different books. 2 are in the US and 1 is in Europe. And the first thing we did when they signed the book deal was reach out to media and say, hey, it's a year out, but I want to, like, there's someone that I know, like, I'm going to reach out to Brian Metzler. Brian, I want to give you first dibs at this story when this comes out, so you can break the whole spiel on
What's
it with
the story?
this. Very good, John. You almost got me. So I think media is really important. Like, I love media partners, like writers and journalists. Just, I would love to just shout from the rooftops of things. If there's something going on that I know is going to be like a really big deal and I want to make sure that it has the care that it needs, I'll reach out to, very specific journalists to help tell that story. Or maybe if something really hard is going on and the story is going to break, I will absolutely be intentional with the media that I reach out to, depending on what that sensitivity of it is, that I can say, hey, John, can you be the person to interview this person and tell that story? Because I know they'll be cared for and in good hands with you and feel safe. So I'm a big fan of it. I think it is an error to not work with media in a bigger way.
What about on the contract side? Are you inserting bonuses? I know when I was at Inside Tracker, I was able to weave in, like if you mention your experience with the platform, you get $500. And that was a no-brainer because you make a transaction, it's $500. So somebody talks about something and the ROI is there for sure. Are you having those bonuses inserted into contracts?
Some contracts already have it in there. There's some that, especially the smaller partners or like the second tier, so nutrition, watches, eyewear, that sort of thing. If they cannot give like a large base salary, I'll often see little fun nuggets like that in there that are really cool. And then as far as a bonus for media, one thing that I really love to see is it might be like if you get on these podcasts or if you make it on this list, like you, Roy, or T. Roy, or whatever it is, we'll give you $1,000. Or if you win whatever of the year, you get this. So yeah, there's so much fun stuff that can be had in a contract and individualized. And anytime I can put something like that in there, especially if it's like the brand's like, oh, we just can't get any more. But the athlete's like, I really need this in order to like just help pad my, like if I'm not going to be working to do this and I need this, then it's like, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and see where we can get some fun things in here that just help, that are several smaller things that are more approachable for the brand. They can split that up into different marketing buckets instead of just the athlete budget. And then the athlete's still getting those funds, but it's just from different ways.
I was about to ask about that. If you could explain, like, where are athletes getting paid from? And is there an opportunity for them, I don't want to say to double dip, but like do influencer things on top of athlete sponsorship deals? Like, again, look at Des Linden and Kara Goucher. They have shoe deals through Brooks, but they have a separate podcast deal through Brooks. Are there athletes in trail? Is like Dylan Bowman doing these types of things? How are you seeing it from a like maximizing impact standpoint, knowing you can dip into a brand marketing budget versus a sponsorship budget?
Yeah, I love this question. Anyone who is an athlete who also has a podcast, you're missing the boat if you do not have a separate contract for your podcast. Let's say if you had...
Say that again.
Yeah, you are missing the boat if you don't have a separate contract. Like you are not, if you were a sponsored athlete, I would be, John, you need an athlete contract. And then if they're like, oh, but we'll also sponsor, part of this is for the long run, and be like, nope. John is separate from the long run.
Do you see that athletes are being taken advantage of with that?
No, actually, well, one, a lot of brands just don't know. Two, there are brands that definitely know that are like, how can we help you with this? We really want to support your podcast. And Ultra has been awesome with this. Shout out Colby Gold. They have a couple athletes. I think they're all women probably on the Ultra team who have podcasts right now. And they're like, what can we give you? Like, let's come up with a package for a monthly stipend. We'll also buy you new microphones. We can buy you cameras. Like, what do you want? And they're just like, tell us what you want. And that comes from, so the athlete base salary comes from the athlete management bucket, right? And then there's other buckets under that marketing umbrella that go to different things, right? So there's a whole other bucket that's just for like media. That's probably where Colby would get it from. Or if he couldn't take it out of media, I'd be like, well, find it somewhere else, Colby. Go away and look at your buckets and come back. And he'd be like, I found it. And this is where we're going to take it from. So there's a lot of opportunity and option out there. And I think it's really cool to see that. Again, it's an error if you're not doing that. Let's say if you and Kate had a podcast and you were each sponsored by a different shoe brand. That's another perfect example of why it needs to be separate. Because if you're with Solomon and Kate is with Hoka, then you can't have Hoka sponsoring the podcast because then Solomon's going to get, irritated. So there's ways to work around that, but the effort has to be there.
Are you pushing athletes to find different mediums to connect on? I think of an athlete like Kat Bradley, who's not great at Instagram, but she's incredible at podcasting.
Absolutely. And does she tape hers too? Are they on YouTube?
Yes,
I feel like
think
they
they're
are, right?
video. Yeah, because
Yeah.
Carson's great
Yes,
at
because I've
video.
watched Carson.
Yeah. By the way, the two of them are incredible. Like the
They really
energy
are.
between the two. Obviously, they're married, but the
It's
energy.
good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just adore Carson and Kat, obviously. But so, yes, this is a really great example. And a brand will be, and it kind of goes back to that Will Murray thing, right? If they're like, look, we know he's not comfortable with this. We're going to help him build this. But in doing so, they'll watch and see, like, you know what? We notice you're not comfortable with this, but you're really good on camera. Do you want to do more of that? Like, how can we help you? So, with someone like Kat, that is a really great example. I love that you mentioned that because brands are, it's not just one thing, right? And the reason I ask about YouTube is because we all know like TikTok doesn't matter anymore, but YouTube
Depends who you ask.
in the trail running space, we'll say that. YouTube is really, I mean, it's not like a week doesn't go by that someone isn't, if a brand is like, hey, we're thinking about John, what about this? What about that? And they'll be like, oh, wait, does he have a YouTube? I'll be like,
now.
You do now. So that's a bump because brands are starting to see so much more visibility on YouTube, and that is bringing more visibility to them. And they can use that in such a unique way that is siloed outside of like just Instagram or whatever.
I went to Outdoor Media Summit, and it seemed like 50% of the discussions were about AI and 50% were about YouTube. And there was a conversation with one brand who sells a product, and he stopped doing SEO and focused entirely on YouTube. And 35% of his revenue via attribution captured via post-purchase survey comes from YouTube. And so he's doing such great content on YouTube that it's driving crazy sell-through, but he's monetized. And now he's a brand with a CPG making money on YouTube. Thousands of dollars a month.
Yeah. I mean, the proof's in the pudding. Yeah. That's a great example.
I've been going back and forth in trying to figure out what to do with YouTube. And I have 1,000 subscribers, and I've mostly done an audio podcast with like a 10-minute segment on YouTube plus 2 Instagram reels that make their way onto shorts. And then I look at the conversation that Finn had with David, 13,000 views on YouTube. And I'm guessing that that's somewhere around or higher than the number of downloads he's getting per episode. So it's like a second podcast.
Absolutely.
Or more.
You're already doing it, so why not just put a camera on?
Right. Shout out to Dylan, who's actually doing it.
Yeah. And Finn's exceptional as far as his interviewing. I really, like, there's something so unique and different about you and Finn. And I don't say yes to a lot of podcasts, so shout out to you for that
Thank
as
you.
well.
Appreciate it.
I don't recall the percentage of viewers on YouTube for Finn, but I was shocked at how high it was. You should ask him and see what it is, because the first day that we started to record, we were having just really bad weather up at our house, so it just didn't work out. And he was like, let's just record it next week. And I was like, I'll just make sure I'm in a better spot. And I said, is it worth it because it's taped? And he said, yeah, because X amount of our viewers. And I was like, holy crap, that was a lot. Whatever it was, apologies, viewers. I don't remember the number, but ask Finn.
Yeah, and shout out to Finn. I think that his podcast has taken off because he's just a curious person. Mm-hmm. And you said to him in that episode, I like doing interviews with you because you don't have an ego and you ask questions, you didn't say this, but like you ask questions versus making statements. And he's very good at like pressing in the right places and continuing down a thread. And yeah, it's wild to see what the numbers are doing on YouTube.
I'm always mystified by the numbers on YouTube. I am not someone who generally watches YouTube, but my husband definitely does, because he's always watching like cycling things or doozer. Yeah. He's always watching like his cycling and mountain biking, gravel bike things. But that's the choice that a lot of people use the medium to watch, like whatever their kind of goal is and hobby.
Well, I was talking about this with a couple of friends from San Francisco. Shout out to Tony, David, and Vivek, who I know are watching. I know David's watching this. Tony, thanks for that camera. It's making Kelly look great, and every other guest. And they were just saying that like the amount of people that play it in the background while they're working or just like in their living room. And I just didn't realize that people were doing this. But then there's the ability to jump from chapter to chapter, which you can do on Spotify, but it's a bit easier on YouTube. And so you can go into a thing and see, hey, I want to explore this specific topic, and listen to the 7 minutes on the topic and then move on.
I'm learning so much as a I sometimes YouTube, but I really have no idea about the dynamics of it. So that's very cool.
Yes. Okay, back to the sponsorship side of things. We could talk about YouTube for days. I'm like still trying to figure out. If you're listening to this on the audio version,
Watch the YouTube.
we can watch you. Yeah, please go watch the YouTube. Watch the whole hour and hit like and subscribe. How are brands budgeting to change gears? We think about contract season as what's coming up here at the end of the year. We see a bunch of I loved working with blah, blah, blah brand. And then 3 days later, I'm stoked to announce that I'm working with this brand. So there's that cyclical, 75% of brand partnerships begin in the winter. Correct me if I'm wrong if that percentage is off. But then there are also signings that happen after breakout performances like Rod Farvard or other athletes that, have done well at Cocodona or Western States or UTMB. Like, are they saving budget for those types of events, or are they scrambling to find budget? What's that dynamic of how they're using money and when?
Yeah, it's a really fantastic question. And I've had this conversation several times with people. I'm like, for the right athlete, it's always anytime is contract season.
What does that mean?
That means if you become available and you're a hot ticket, someone's going to scoop you up. They'll find the money. That will absolutely find the money. But the big difference is a lot of brands are on a different fiscal year. So maybe their budget gets released at a different time that 75% of the rest of the brands are.
Right.
So it might look like to someone on the outside that they're scooping people up at a certain time of year for whatever reason. But the biggest reason is probably because they're just on a different fiscal year. There is something that happens between March and Western States, which also obviously happens to be golden ticket season, that there's a couple brands who I know that I can usually count on to be like, hey, I've got someone here that might be of interest to you that I think could be a good fit. Do you want to chat about it? Also, this is where they need to be. So if you aren't sure of this is the bottom where we need to be, if you can't get there, then I'm not going to start the conversation because I don't want to get anybody's hopes up and I don't want to waste the brand's time.
Are they reserving budget for that period of time?
Sometimes, yeah. Or there's this. I think a lot of people are like, well, this is the budget that the brand had this year, so they're going to use every dollar of it, which does not always happen. And I appreciate the intentionality of this because if the brand doesn't find the exact right fit they're looking for, then they're just going to wait. If they're like, oh my gosh, we have all of these great people. We're going to use every dollar we have and then some. That's a different story. But if a brand can't find, just doesn't come to the conclusion of finding someone that they're is the right fit, they'll sit on it. And I appreciate that. And they'll wait and they'll be just really intentional with it. And then what happens, let's say they just hang on to that budget's just there. And then the next year rolls around. And I personally, as an agent, would use that remaining budget from the year before as a signing bonus. And then still take the budget from the next year.
On the flip side, I'm curious about athletes that remain unsigned. There are a handful of athletes that fans want to see signed that maybe just had a breakout race at Javelina or UTMB or Cocodona. They remain unsigned. Why do you think the fan and spectator desires aren't aligning sometimes with what brands are doing and who gets a spot on a team?
This is something that drives me a little bit bananas because I was at Kodiak, whatever that was, a month or so ago, and this will inevitably happen if I'm around a group of athletes and just in the community. And the conversation that I hear is, I don't know why brands don't do this, and brands should do this, and if I worked for a brand, I'd do this. I'm like,
well, you don't.
People have no idea what they're talking about. And also everything that you just said, brands have been doing for years. You just don't know about it because you're not behind the scenes. So there's this funny posturing.
Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah. And it's excruciating for me to hear because I know.
And you have things going on at all times that could pop.
Yes. But I also don't have the bandwidth to have the conversation every single time I leave the house. So I just eat French fries or something. I'm just sipping my lemonade. So a lot of times people have no idea what they're talking about. And like you said, it's human nature. We're all that armchair expert. But then there's this component of it. If someone's like, why did this person not get signed? They've been trying to be signed for 6 months. I'm like, 6 months is 5 minutes. I don't know where we all came to the conclusion that everyone has to be signed within a year or all hope is lost. That is absolutely not accurate. Sometimes it just takes a little bit longer. And being patient will pay off. Riley Brady is a great example of Riley very publicly has said, I turned a lot of things down because it wasn't a good fit. I just wasn't on board with the offer. And Riley waited and was patient for, I think, about 2 years before they found something. They were like, all right, now I'm ready to roll. So I think it's different for everyone. I would rather have someone wait than just sign. The way we all get into trouble when someone's like, oh my God, I signed a contract for $7,000. You probably should have waited. You're the one that signed it.
But the challenge on the flip side, they have to eat, they have to pay rent, things like that. So how do you ameliorate that?
Yeah. I mean, if it's not time, again, I'll use Riley as an example. Riley worked at a bike shop. You know, if I have bills to pay, I'm going to find a way to pay them.
Right.
I'm not going to wait and then
You're not owed
for
anything.
someone that,
Yeah.
exactly, Jonathan. Exactly. Thank you for saying that. But then at the same time, there are people that I'm like, all right, it's time for that person to be sponsored. And that's exactly the scenario with Riley. Then it was like, okay, I historically don't reach out to athletes, but a mutual friend of ours had been harassing me for 2 years to speak to Riley. And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. If Riley wants to speak to me, they can speak to me. And I hadn't met Riley at the time. And then that person said, can you just watch Black Canyon? It's this weekend. I was like, okay, fine. So I watched Black Canyon. I was like, oh, shit. Okay. So I messaged Riley. Yeah. And I was like, okay, it's time. If you would like, I'm happy to help you. So that's a scenario. But then there are other people, we'll use Canyon because I think we spoke about him earlier, or
Canyon Woodward, who just came in second at Javelina.
third.
Third. Right. Yeah.
Very quick, very close behind third, but yes.
Got David's ticket.
And Canyon has been in the sport a long time. So let's say he's been running for 10 years racing. The first probably...
He was up for the long run in 2022, if you want to dial it back and listen to that one.
OG. Yeah, Canyon's fantastic. And he's had a few big performances over the years, but in my mind, this is where the hiccup has been. He has not had a year that had several strong performances in it that were impactful and of races that carried weight. And until that happens, it will take Canyon longer to get signed. I do think he's going to sign soon, just from looking at the trajectory of him. But that's what it's easy for me to look back and see, like, you know, if you have one impactful performance a year, that's not enough because it does not show a continued trajectory.
Like a breakout performance, like a Chris Andrews at Javelina who ran really fast.
Was he fifth?
I think he was fifth.
Fourth or fifth, yeah.
His claim to fame is the fastest 100-miler as a Gen Zer.
Yes. I'm happy to chat about this because Chris has messaged me several times. So this does not negate what Chris has done, but no one cares that you're the fastest Gen Zer. And I'm not saying no one cares about Chris. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. I'm going to repeat that. But that's like me saying, I'm the fastest person with brown hair and blue eyes. That doesn't matter. Like, if that's what you're doing, you need to find a different angle because it's not, and again, I'm not going to placate. I'm just shooting from the hip here.
But don't you think that the ability to speak to a specific audience is of interest? Like, all of the athletes that are sponsored by trail teams right now, nobody is addressing that market directly.
What do you mean? Like, there's no other athlete that's a Gen Z that's signed?
That's a bad statement.
Yeah, it is. That's okay. I'm like, are you listening to the words coming out of your mouth?
25. Yeah, there are a lot of 25.
There are. I mean, I can list a laundry list of them.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. To Chris's point, he's like, but I'm the fastest. Well, that's arbitrary. What is that? You're the fastest what? You might have been the fastest at a whole lot of races that you've done or every race that you've done. But if none of those races, I say it on every single podcast at nauseum, if none of those races were races that are impactful, that brands are watching, it does not matter and you are wasting your time.
So are the races that matter the ones that feed into Western States and UTMB? Is Hard Rock on that? Like, if somebody is wanting to get noticed by a brand, they're not going to go run the Jolly Roger 10K or 100 Fidelity 401K.
I'm laughing because Alyssa Clark and I have this joke, and I'm like, great, they were the fastest at the Possum Ramble 5K. It doesn't matter. You could have the record at that for 50 years straight, and it does nothing. So, and again, I realize this is really hard to hear. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I'm not going to waste everyone's time and placate. So it's what the bonus, so that every brand will have a bonus schedule, right? There's like A races, B races, C races. The races that are the A races have the highest bonus structure. So that would be UTMB, Western States. Usually Hard Rock is in there. If it's not in there, then it's the very next tier.
And is that $100, $1,000, $10,000? Can you give like orders of magnitude?
Sure. Let's say, like, depending on the race, they will pay out top 5 or top 10, depending on the brand and the race. Like Western States makes sense, top 10, because it's all Western States, that's their jam. I would say the average, we're going to smush them all up in a bowl and average them out. Big 5 shoe brands, the average first place for Western States, again, average, I would say, is 30 to 35K. And UTMB is often less, a little bit less, not a ton less, but a little bit less. And then, it drops down. But whatever the races that fall into the bonus structure of those brands, and each brand is a little bit different. But if you have the luxury of getting an athlete manager to speak to you or respond to an email, I would not hang up that phone until you ask them, what are the races that your company is focused on for this next year? What are those races? What are you not focused on? And again, every brand is different, especially depending on where their parent company is located. And then there's tier A, B, and C, or 1, 2, 3, however they have it aligned. And then somewhere after that, the FKTs fall. And I'm not sure how this happened, but so many people are under the impression that if you get an FKT that you're going to get $50,000, and that's absolutely not accurate. Most FKTs, especially if we think of the big ones like the AT, the PCT, JMT, that's probably $5K.
So in conclusion, single effort breakout races, that's not why brands are signing athletes.
You need more than one race. A breakout race is like, oh, okay, now we're going to watch this person. I actually spoke with a brand yesterday about an athlete, and they were like, we were really happy to see that, because when this athlete did this at this race last year, we were like, is this just a flash in the pan? And we needed to watch. So that's your answer right there. It has to be more than one. You don't just win one thing and that's it. And Dan Green is a great example of this. Yes, he won Cocodona, but there was a lot more going on for Dan before that. That sealed the deal of the trajectory of where Dan was at. Cocodona did.
So, okay, we know about the events that are front and center, that are getting millions of views, etc. What about like a Charlie Lawrence, who just signed with Adidas, and Adidas is focused on world records, or a Zach Bitter, who was with Ultra for a long time and has world records and American records, and is currently chasing 10 100-milers under 12 hours. Like, are brands interested in that kind of stuff too? Like, that's an exceptional athletic performance, and it's quite a validation of whatever. Like, he's running in the Puma Fast R3, and I've been trying to get him a deal with Puma, and they haven't moved on that. Why is something like that not of interest? Yeah, I'm curious to like triage something like that.
Mm-hmm. I love that term, triage. Okay, I would say your first one, was it like a world record something?
Charlie has been chasing world records in the 50-mile and 100K on the road, and he has a deal with it. He signed with Adidas. And
he's Adidas, not Terex, yeah?
Correct.
Okay. That makes sense that he's with Adidas, not Adidas Terex, and specifically because he's road, yeah? I feel like maybe Adidas, that's probably not why they're with him. I suspect that they're with him for everything else that he represents, and that was a project that he just came to the table with, and they were like, how can we support you? But I don't think that someone would I'm not surprised that Puma is pausing on this. If Zach was a well-rounded fit for, like, the person has to be the well-rounded fit. Like, no one wants to pick up a person just for a project, because the minute that project is done, then what if they're left with Zach Bitter and he's not a nice guy? Obviously he is. Obviously he is. Guy. But I mean, he's an exceptional athlete, but it wouldn't be, if you just want to get dollars to sponsor that project, that's one conversation.
And is that a different contact at the brand?
Well, it depends on the brand. Oh, it's a different bucket than the athlete bucket. But if Zach was already on that team, then it would be error for whoever for him to not get separate budget for that project under his contract. And then if he wanted to bring that up mid-year or mid-contract, 2 years into a 4-year deal or something, I would still bring it up even if it wasn't on your contract. But you're likely to get money out of a different bucket for that project. But it is an error for a brand. I agree with Puma on this one, or their pause anyway, is we might be on board with this project, but we don't know if we need someone right now. Maybe it's not that Zach isn't a good fit, but maybe they just don't need that.
Yeah, the shoe is dominating in every space.
Yeah, so there's different reasons and answers to all of
Fascinating.
that. Yeah, that's my 2 cents
Yeah,
anyway.
makes sense. I think the last topic I want to get into is really, I guess, on the same lines. There was a question submitted by aspiring professional athlete. What is the timeline of start to finish getting a title sponsor? You've kind of been talking about it, but can you put on average, it takes 18 months kind of a thing?
I mean, obviously it depends on what your race resume is and what you're doing. But let's say, I mean, nothing is guaranteed. I've had some that were like 48 hours, and I have one that I've been working on for 10 months. And the reason that one at 10 months is paused is because the athlete needs to perform, quite honestly. That's literally what they have to do. So I can't do anything with that. But right now, the athlete just needs to train, race, recover, and be an athlete. And I think that's a really important conversation. Like, you shouldn't just be here to be signing something. You should be here, like, if you want to be an athlete and live in that moment. But let's say if you wanted to start and reach out to a brand, because I think this is where the question is coming from, I would say UTMB. That month is a big one. If you're at UTMB, I'm always mystified that so many athlete managers want to speak to people during UTMB week because it's an absolute circus. The chaos is real, right? And like, I just do not have the bandwidth to do all that at the same time. I did not go to UTMB this year, and I was like, oh my gosh, maybe be a little quiet when I'm home because everyone's there. It was the exact opposite, because I was just having the meetings that I would have had in Chamonix, but at home on my computer. So let's say the week of UTMB, either before, during, or right after, that's when you should kind of be starting those reaching out, the conversations. And then this is the scenario that happens all the time. So I'm going to bring it up because I know athletes they're like, oh my gosh, we had this great conversation, then I heard nothing for weeks. Be prepared for that, because now they're speaking to everyone and there's more than just you. So it will be somewhere at I would say mid-October to mid-December, that no man's land of when contracts will be signed. So you'll do all this work ahead of time, and then you're like, oh, it's excruciating.
Right.
And
it's predictable.
Exactly. So please hear that. It's excruciating for the athlete, it's excruciating for the athlete manager, and it's definitely excruciating for me. But it's all fun. It's all really great stuff. There's a time frame there. The athletes are like, oh my God, did they forget about me? And I'm like, I promise you they didn't. I had someone reach out today. I'm so nervous. And I'm like, it's going to be okay, I promise.
I love that. Do you have to remind people you should be sponsored for the right reasons? Do you have that conversation with your athletes?
I bring it up very infrequently with the athletes I work with, because I take a very specific type of person on, and there's someone who they're really intentional with who they're aligned with. And if it's not something that they align with, like, I don't even have to say anything, because they'll be like, what about this? And I'll say blah, blah, blah. And they're like, nope, moving on.
Okay, last questions. Call to action for athletes, call to action for brands.
Oh, man. Good luck to everyone in the midst of all this. I'm sending you all my best vibes. Call to action for athletes. Just be patient, and remember, like, if you don't get signed in a specific year or ever, honestly, it doesn't mean you're less of an athlete or a person. If we look at this, let's say there are, I don't know, 8 major footwear brands, right? There's only a certain amount of spots on each team, and there's a whole lot of people, thousands of people competing for each of these spots. So if you aren't the one that's chosen, again, it does not take away from your value. So I would just encourage people to be patient, and then also just be compassionate. And the brands are not the bad guy. Some of my favorite people to speak to are athlete managers. And I often, like last week, I was like, gosh, I feel like a punching bag. There's so much going on, and the athlete managers are all beat up, and everybody's just going through it. This season seems extraordinarily difficult. But for the brands, I would say, if you can, be mindful of the timeline that people are waiting on. And even if it's like, hey, we just can't take you on this year, that you just send, even if it's just like a brief email or text. I think that would really be helpful. And I know that everyone tries to do that. I mean, my own inbox is deep. It would also help remove things from that brand manager, athlete manager's plate to do that.
And one last question, I promise. Call to action for the fans of the sport.
Gosh, just keep cheering, man. Like, we're growing in a way this is a really exciting time. Like this, you hear this all the time, right? Like, we're in a moment. This is the moment. Like, it's really unique and special, and the changes that are all coming to fruition in trail running right now are really, really cool, and it's an honor to be a part of it. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Kelly. This was a blast. We squeezed every minute possible. I have a meeting in 2 minutes.
Oh, no.
3 minutes.
Oh,
This has been a
thanks for
blast.
having me.
Yeah, thank you, and we'll see you out there.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.